Hey guys, this is Doug with Four Wheel Drive Trek. Today we're going to be working on a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon with the dreaded casting sand issue. Lack of heat inside the cab and overheating a little bit on steep inclines. It's a common thing for the 3.6 liter Pentastar engine from the 2012 Wrangler and up. We're going to be pulling apart the radiator, replacing that, replacing the reservoir, the heater core, and some hoses. So it's gonna be a fun project to do. The first thing you want to do is going to be cleaning out the coolant. Now you want to drain out the current coolant that's in there, and replace it with some distilled water, flush it through, and then drain that out as well. All right, so the first thing you got to do is you got to drain the radiator. So for that, there's going to be a little wing nut on the front side of the radiator up underneath here on the passenger side. It is really hard to show you on the video. Basically, it's just if you have small forearms like me, you can reach in right here, grab it. Otherwise, you have to come up underneath and then just kind of twist it off. Make sure you have something that's going to be catching all the fluid in it. You do not want that to go down the drain. I don't want to kill those fishies. I want to make sure keep nature safe. So let's drain that out.
Now this is the coolant with the casting sand. This is after being flushed out multiple times, and it is still coming out. This is why the entire cooling system needs to be replaced.
All right, so got the coolant all drained out. I flushed it out 3 times, making sure I can get as much stuff out of it as we can. And yep, time to start pulling it apart. Easiest thing you can do is put that hood back up on the windshield. Make sure you're very careful putting it back, but it gives you all the space you need to get access to everything underneath. It gives you a little bit more light like I have here. So first things first, let's pull that radiator out.
Pull off the top of the engine cover. There are two 10mm bolts you will remove to pull the intake hose off. There will be 2 clamps on either side of the intake that you're going to have to remove. I just used a Phillips tip screwdriver. Once the clamps are free, pull this hose off, and then you're going to wiggle the intake off the throttle body and the air filter. Once you have that, you're going to have a small electrical plug on the underside. You're going to want to remove that before you pull the intake tubing off. Next, you will remove the coolant overflow reservoir. Pull it straight up, and then pull the hose off the other side. Following that, you will remove the radiator hoses. Now, I find it easier to remove the top hose first, release a little bit of the air pressure before I move down to the lower one. The lower one will be a little more difficult to reach, so I'm going to remove the air box out of the way to give us a little extra room for it. If you have a lifted Jeep like me, standing on the bumper definitely helps out a little bit. Once you have both radiator hoses free, just tuck them to the side.
So now you want to pull this plastic shroud off to get access to the top of the radiator. You want to pull out these little plastic grommets here. Best thing to do is get one of these little tools here and it pops right out.
These probably have not been removed since factory, so take your time and be careful. Once you have the shroud out of the way, you're going to be reaching down and unplugging the fan power cable. Very simple to remove.
Alright, so one thing that you can do to help you out a little bit getting access to the front side of the radiator is pop this grill off. On the grill you have these tabs. You just pop those out. So you have 6 of those along the top right there. Pop those all off and then kind of pop the front of that away.
There are 2 10mm bolts holding the radiator to the front core support. One on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. I found removing these first gave it a little bit easier access to move the radiator around to get to the front bolts holding the transmission cooler. In this whole process, I found the transmission cooler bolts the hardest. You have one right on the driver's side of the radiator. You will have a 10mm bolt on the driver's side behind that tube, down towards the bottom, a little harder to access. Directly above that, there will be 2 10mm bolts. You only want to pull out the top one. On the passenger side, you will have 2 more 10mm bolts in the same 2 locations. Once you have all 5 of the transmission cooler bolts out, all you got to do is remove the radiator, which may take a little bit of finesse to get it out.
Alright, so now that we got the radiator out, now we got to get this fan off the back of the radiator. You have 2 bolts on the top, and then you have 2 little slots that are on the bottom side.
These 2 bolts on either side of the radiator are 10mm bolts. Once you have those out, it will slide out of these 2 channels and then away from the radiator, as you can see here. I did find it a little bit easier to wiggle out each side until it came free, opposed to giving it just one big tug.
Alright, what I like to do when I get a new radiator is set each radiator, old and new, side by side, and make sure, they're the same radiator. I have gotten bad radiators before, or wrong radiators where they don't have the correct mounting points, so make sure that you do have the correct radiator that you pulled out compared to the new one. So all the things that you transfer over from one to the other will fit, and it will fit in the vehicle. Alright, so you need to remove 4 items from the old radiator. You have 2 bushings where the screws mount into. Those you pull off just by sliding out to the sides. They have the 2 mounting brackets. They're little rubber grommets that sit on the bottom, and you just kind of slide those off. Now, they are directional. It's going to be like the shape of a D. One side's going to be flat, one side's going to be round. So you make sure that when you put it back on, you put it back on the correct direction. Alright, so now that we have those rubber grommets on the new radiator, it is time to put the fan back on the new radiator. That's going to be the same process going backwards. You just slip the 2 mounting places into the slots at the bottom, which should line up the holes for the bolts. Then you throw the 2 bolts in there, and then it's got to be mounted all up. Alright, so now we got the old fan on the new radiator and the 4 rubber grommets. It is time to put that radiator back into the engine. So everything you saw already, just do it backwards, and then we'll move on to the heater core after that. Make sure you go down to your local auto parts store, pick up yourself some 5/8 inside diameter heater hose, and pick up some 1/2-inch clamps. We're going to have to use these when we hook up the heater core to the existing piping. Heater core is going to be a little more difficult, however we're going to do it in a way that we don't have to take the dash apart. We're only going to take out part of the passenger side and kind of cut a couple pieces to get it out.
To remove the glove box, press in near the tabs on the top to slide it on out. Next, I removed this side piece by prying it open until it popped right on out.
You're going to take out 3 7mm bolts. Got one here. You have one on this side and one on this side. It's going to be a 7mm. Pull the
To gain access to the grab bar bolts, you're going to remove this silver piece, which may be a different color depending on your trim.
Alright, once you get this piece off, you have 2 bolts in here, one there, and one in there. Those are going to be 8mm bolts.
After you remove the 2 bolts, just set the handle to the side. Now this spot seems a little silly, but what you're going to do is take a ratchet strap or a bungee cord and rope it around that part of the dash and then tighten it down so it pulls away and gives you access.
Alright, so now that we got the ratchet strap, going to pull this guy up and out of the way to give us access to all of this down here. Now, what you want to do is we're going to make 3 cuts. We're going to do 1 cut right here on the right side of this bolt so we can use this once again. We're going to do a cut up here. We're going to do it on the left side of this so it keeps this intact. And then we're going to make 1 more cut right over here. That way we still have the 2 points of mounting. So this is all still sturdy afterwards, still squared around. But we're going to get access to this right here. I do want to grab this right here. I'm going to just give it a little jerk. It's going to pop right out. Give you a little more access to get to these tubes right here. So make sure you pull that out before you start cutting on that bracket down here. One thing to remember, guys, it is good to have proper eye protection and ear protection before you start making loud noises, especially cutting, grinding, things like that. I'm going to throw them on, so Let's get cutting. And once you have your cuts made, you're going to be taking off this bolt and that bolt. And then this entire piece is going to come out and give you access to the heater core. Now that we have this bracket out of the way, now we have access to the heater core itself. Now here's where it gets tricky. You are going to have to make a cut across here and a cut across here. Now this does have coolant in it, so it will be draining a little bit of coolant out. Make sure you have something to catch it, otherwise it's going to be right there on your floorboard. So now that you got these two pipes cut, slide the radiator core out. Bear in mind that it still will be full of coolant, so you want to tip it up as you bring it out, not to spill any down there on the carpet.
And this is the casting sand that was inside the heater core. This is why we're replacing this as well.
So now what you want to do is you want to transfer these two cuts over to the new heater core. So you match this tubing up with this one here, cut the same distance. Same thing with this one, cut the same distance, then we'll throw it back into the car.
As you can see after the cut, this needs to be deburred. So I'm taking a file just to clean up the edges on the inside and the out.
As you can see, this also has a little bit of burrs on it, so you want to make sure and get rid of all that excess on the outside.
I am using 5/8 inside diameter heater hose and 1/2 inch clamps.
Alright, so you want to put about 1 inch of the heater core tubing on either of these two. Put 2 hose clamps on there. So then now we're going to slip the heater core back in here, and then slip the piping over the edge of the heater core that we cut, and then clamp them down.
Here's what it looks like completed. Make sure as you're tightening down those clamps you don't over tighten. The tubes are aluminum, you run a risk of crushing them. After you finish this, just button it all back up and you are good to go.
That concludes the coolant system, radiator, heater core, and the reservoir replacement. So now let's just fill it up with coolant and let's see how she runs.